All right, just so we can get started and finish on time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our second session of our webinar series on the Greater You Leadership Matrix. So my name is Julianne Ng. I am so excited to be with you all today. I want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case, you can find everything down the bottom. So you can mute, unmute yourself. Unmuting is important. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. You can control your video. If you need captions, you can go down the bottom as well. There should be a circle with 3 dots that says more. Click on that and you can find show captions. You can control showing them or hiding them in there. So I want to start by giving you all a heads up that we really design our trainings to be interactive. So I want to hear your voices. I get pretty tired of hearing mine all the time. So that's why I was talking about the mute button. Feel free to unmute yourself. You don't need to raise your hand, just unmute yourself. Use the chat function. I would really love to hear from you all because I know that you're all bringing experiences and knowledge to this workshop. I also really encourage you to be present with me this hour. So you took the time out of your busy day to join us. So if you can, I know it's really hard, minimize those windows, close that email, that can wait. I would love for you to be present and engaged with us this morning or afternoon, wherever you are. So if you're not familiar with the Greater You Leadership Series, I just want to start by sharing a little about us. So our organization was founded in 2019 by our CEO, Kristen Webb. And really, we help build leaders from the inside out. And that's very intentional, inside out. So we do this through a variety of leadership trainings, development services. We cover a variety of topics, just like this webinar series. And throughout our services, we really focus on each individual to help support your goals and the goals of your organization. So that's a little bit about our organization. Let me tell you a little bit more about me. So as I mentioned, my name is Julianne Ng. Yes, there are no vowels in my last name. It is a pain, but yes, no vowels, pronounced Ng. So I have been an educator for over 15 years in various capacities. I've been a professor at the university level. I also run trainings just like this one. And I often do that in my areas of expertise, which are data analytics, continuous improvement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've also worked in a bunch of different sectors. So I've worked in the K-12 sector, higher education. I've worked with nonprofits, for-profits, and so on and so forth. So that is a little bit about me. I would love to know who's in the room with me today. So please, in the chat, can you share with me? I'm going to put a little prompt in the chat just so you have it, is where are you joining from? And I would love to know, what are you hoping to gain from this webinar series? All right. Memphis, Tennessee, South Carolina, another Memphian. Okay, Illinois. Okay, got a few folks from Springfield, a few folks from Memphis. All right. All right. Well, thank you all for sharing and the reasons why you are here as well. All right. Memphis is representing today. Love that. And Illinois. And Illinois. All right. Well, if you haven't shared, please keep sharing in the chat. Would love to see who else is here. But what I'd like to share with you next is this quote by our CEO, Kristen Webb, that I love. You cannot stumble upon greatness. You walk up to it and introduce yourself. Thinking about this quote, what does this mean to you? So feel free to put it in the chat, unmute yourself. What does this mean to you?
I would say taking the initiative to become great. And if that's learning, taking classes, or asking for help, getting advice. But we have to take the initiative or take that first step to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sonia and Allison. Yeah, means don't wait, go and do it. That is exactly it. I really love this quote because it's exactly what you said, Sonia. We need to take the initiatives for ourselves to be great leaders. So I just want to acknowledge you all for taking the initiative to be here in this workshop today. So kudos to all of you for taking the time to be with us. So this is the leadership framework that we use, and we call it our leadership matrix. And so we consider these four components to be the pillars to become an effective and transformative leader. So it starts with self-awareness. So as I mentioned with this Greater You Leadership series, we build leaders from the inside out. So it has to start with you. It starts with self-awareness. Once you deepen your self-awareness, you're going to be better positioned to tackle those other components. So cultivating a culture of accountability, mastering effective communication, and then embracing servant leadership. So this webinar series, the 4-part webinar series, is structured around this matrix. So yesterday, my colleague Stacey facilitated a workshop on self-awareness. I'd love to know, add in the chat whether you were in the workshop yesterday. Would love to see. All right, good number of people. And it's okay if you went. We're happy to have you today. She did. I was there yesterday. Stacey did awesome. Definitely set the bar. So if you were not with us, for self-awareness, just a brief overview about what Stacey went through. Stacey talked about how self-awareness is important to be an effective leader. She also talked about how to identify personal leadership strengths and areas for growth, and then went through some techniques for actually developing self-awareness. So today we're going to be tackling the second pillar of this leadership matrix, and we'll be diving into how accountability supports being an effective leader. So let's start with the objective. So what would I like for you to get out of today's session? So I hope that we'll be able to define the role of accountability in leadership success. We'll also explore practical methods for building and sustaining a culture of accountability. And then I'm going to give you an opportunity to create your own accountability plan so you can implement that immediately. So let's start with this. So what does accountability mean to you? Please add to the chat, unmute yourself. What does accountability mean? I do what I say I will do when I say I'll do it. Yeah, absolutely. What else? Being responsible for your actions. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I
Taking
think,
responsibility. Yep. Go ahead, Allison. Allison, did you have something to add?
oh yeah, I was gonna say, I think it means I probably have a plan of something I'm gonna do, and then I'm gonna do it, and I'm going to follow up on it and like see how I did on it. I'm gonna monitor it. I'm gonna follow up.
Yeah, so that's big. Not only are you going to make a plan, but you're going to follow up on it. Absolutely. Yep. So taking responsibility for myself, my words and my actions, following through, no fuzzy agreements. Oh, that's a big one. It goes two ways, remind each other, provide feedback. Absolutely. Being able to accept and acknowledge when you might have had it wrong. Absolutely. Yeah. So you all know what accountability is, right? What I'd like you to think about now, I'd love to hear any examples you want to share when you have seen accountability in action, and then what was the effect that it had on you or on others? So you can think about this maybe as a time when you were accountable and then the effect it had, or think about when you saw someone else being accountable and then the effect it had. So would love to hear any stories anyone has, if you're willing to unmute and share that.
Okay, I can share a story.
Thanks, Alison.
Okay, so I can share a story of where I've made a mistake in my planning.
Mhm.
And this goes back to private sector, and I was planning, right? Planning with very perishable commodity, and something went wrong with the plan. So, as being accountable, I had to go back and look at, well, what went wrong, and what am I going to do so that that never happens again?
Mm.
And I had to kind of like write up a thing and go over it with the owner of the company, and then that was fine. And then we moved forward from there. But that was being accountable for, the area that I was in charge of. And that was okay, as long as we looked at it and then we had a plan of how we were going to improve on it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And so when you admitted that to your client, I think you said, what was their response?
Oh, that was my boss, like the owner
Your
of the
boss.
company.
Okay.
He was very, what's the word? Like he understood, that I probably did the best that I could have done with what I had, and that, these things can go wrong, and um, there's always room to improve, and he was fine with that. I don't think there was anyone there that could have done it better, probably, is what he thought. Yeah, he was fine with that.
Yeah, no, appreciate that because sometimes if we make a mistake, right, we don't know it can be hard to admit it.
Yeah.
And we don't know how the other person is going to respond. So the fact is, a lot of the times, hopefully, like your boss, they realize that we're all human. And as you said, maybe other people, no one else would have been able to do that better than you could have. So we just need to remember that. Don't cast blame. Absolutely. Absolutely. What I loved that you said, Alison, is that you learned from it. You tried to make sure you put things in place to make sure that it didn't happen again. So that in itself is really powerful.
Yeah, he was big on the whole corrective action
Yes.
thing. Yeah.
That is huge. That's important. And I'm sure you felt personally yourself that you didn't want to make that mistake
Yeah,
again.
I learned a lot.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to share? Or I'll give you an option. Does anyone have an example? You can share if you've seen accountability in action, or have you seen the reverse? Is there a situation you've been in, there was no accountability, and what was the effect from that?
I can share, well, just in general.
Okay, yep, it's a safe space here. We won't tell
Yes.
anyone. You don't need to use names. Thank you, Sonia.
Well, so when your team or when my team is holding each other accountable,
Hmm.
that makes it builds trust. So
Yeah,
I trust that the supervisors is holding their team accountable. That means that everyone is doing what they're supposed to do. So it may not have been a mistake, um, but it's building trust within our team, if that makes sense.
absolutely. It sure does.
Yes.
When
So
people
I
say,
know, no, I was just saying, I know that, they're holding because we're all accountable. We're accountable for what we do, but we should also be accountable for what our team is doing as well.
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Sonia. That's huge. Building that accountability builds that trust. Thank you so much for the example. So I am going to show you a video now. And as I play it to you, as you're watching it, I want you to think about how accountability shows up in this scene.
Quiet! Gentlemen, in this hand, I hold contracts signed by me and signed by you. In this hand, I hold academic progress reports prepared by your teachers. We have 6 players failing at least one class, 8 players getting incompletes based on attendance. Gentlemen, you have failed to I'm sorry. We have failed. We have failed each other. Now, there are some of you who have upheld this contract, but know that we are a team. And until we all meet the terms of this contract, the gym will remain locked.
Locked? What you mean locked? Well, like for the day? You must mean for the day.
Mr. Thompson, Mr. Gessick, and Ms. Sherman have generously volunteered their time to help us reach our goals.
But Coach, I have a 3.3.
That's good, sir. Do you score all the points for the team, too? We are the Richmond Oilers. Do you know what Oilers stands for? Sir? Know that you're not just walking out on me. You're walking out on them.
All right. I love Samuel L. Jackson. So what I'm going to do now is put you all into breakout groups to discuss how you saw accountability show up in the video. I'm going to just put that prompt in the chat. And this is also an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to one another, to meet other leaders in the room. And so I'm going to put you into groups of 3, and let's do 5 minutes in the breakout room. So go ahead, introduce yourself, and then discuss how did accountability show up in the video. So I'll give you 5 minutes, then we'll come back and then share out. And welcome back. So because I'm nosy, I want to know what you talked about. So who would like to share what came out of your conversation? So what did you talk about in terms of how accountability showed up in that little movie clip that we watched?
In my opinion, what I saw, nobody is bigger than the team. Commit to
Oh,
a team and come up with solutions or advancements as a team. Nobody is better than anybody else.
love that. Thank you for sharing. Other groups, what did you all talk about?
pretty similar to what Robbie said. We kind of just talked about the fact that it was a we type situation, not an I. We're all going to do this together, or, not anybody individually, but we as a team are going to do this.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a point when the coach said, "You have failed," and then stopped himself and said, "I'm sorry, we've failed one another." So that change in language can be just so powerful. Allison, did you have something to share? I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty much we summed it up as that if one fails, then we all fail. But he was gonna hold everybody back and make everybody help everybody else to get where they needed to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And thanks for sharing, Sophia, in the chat as well. You make up a team, not you are just a part of a team. That definitely makes sense. Thank you. Love what you all came up with. Love those insights. All right. So we consider accountability as a pillar of leadership for many of these reasons that you see here. So first of all, accountability leads to building trust. So how do you think accountability leads to trust building? We sort of talked about this before. Let's hear from you.
Well, it's what I said earlier. I don't know if someone else wants to give their opinion too, but like I said, you're building trust because we're holding each other accountable. So we know that if we're working on a project, and everyone's holding each other accountable, making sure that we're all, doing our part. Because one person's decision, just like the guy on the team, just one person's decision will impact the whole outcome of the project or whatever you're working on. But if we're holding each other accountable, there's trust that we're going to get this done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's trust to know that you're not by yourself, that your team has
Yes.
your back. And when your team when as a member of a team, when you know your team has your back, like you said, that bond, just to, piggyback off that bond and is created to know that you are not alone. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Thanks for sharing. And then Stacy in the chat, if I am accountable, then I create conditions in which it's easier for others to rely on me to do what I say I'm going to do. Exactly. Exactly. So we don't have to keep pestering others in our team, like, when are you going to do that? But you trust that people are going to do what they say they're going to do. Thank you for sharing. So being accountable also strengthens team accountability. We really just touched on that. So if other people are being accountable, if you're being accountable as a leader, this is just going to set the bar for everyone else in the team. And they're more likely to hold themselves accountable, especially if there's that culture of doing that. Accountability can also lead to improved decision making. So what do you think about this one? So if you are upholding accountability, how do you think this will lead to improved decision making?
If I may,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
think if you think you are just part of a team, then you might not speak up. But if you think that you are an important member that make up a team, you might speak up. And if everyone spoke up and had valuable idea, it might lead to improving decision making.
Absolutely. So that goes back to the trust in that team, that you trust that people are going to listen to you and respect what you have to contribute. Absolutely. So that is going to improve decision making for sure. Also, if you know you're going to be held accountable for a decision you're making, you're going to be more thoughtful. You're going to put some time into making sure that you're making the best decision that you can given the situation. So you're going to be more thoughtful if you're responsible for those outcomes. The contributions will be more meaningful. Absolutely. Listen for understanding. Yes, and yes, absolutely. Thank you all for that. So accountability also fosters a growth mindset. So if you embrace being accountable, this shows that you have a willingness to learn and grow, because if you're going to be held accountable for mistakes that you made, we had this beautiful example about making a mistake. You're going to try not to do them again. So mistakes end up being a learning opportunity. And then accountability also drives performance, because being accountable as a leader is just going to push you to follow through on your promises. And that's going to help with making progress and reaching those goals. So I want to give you just a moment here to think about your own team or your organization. Which of these 5 areas do you think could be strengthened with accountability? So would love to see in the chat what you're thinking about. Okay, Stacy, strengthening team accountability. Same with Jorge. Fostering growth mindset. Building trust. Yep. Building trust. Thank you. As you keep thinking about it, feel free to share in the chat, because the point is that it's really easy to say, be accountable. Let's be accountable as a team. But there are going to be times when it's just going to be a struggle to do it. Like, it's always easier to say than do. And here are some top 3 challenges that are common in maintaining accountability. So first of all, lack of clear expectations. Has anyone been in a meeting where there's a great discussion about all the things that need to be done, and then at the next meeting you realize, well, nothing was actually done? I've been in a number of meetings like that where we realize, well, we didn't actually ask who's going to do it and when are they going to do it by. So when you have a team that isn't clear about their roles and responsibilities, even what the goals are, they're just going to be uncertain about what they're accountable for. Another challenge is inconsistent follow through. So as a leader, by not following up on commitments and deadlines, it's just going to be hard to monitor progress. So that can weaken the culture of accountability, and instead, it could lead to complacency instead. Meetings should have action items with who is assigned and date for completion. Absolutely. That is a perfect way to mitigate that lack of clear expectations, for sure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Then the last one that I have up here as one of the top 3 challenges is fear of conflict or consequences. Now, this one's a biggie, because I don't know about you, but I can say I don't like tension and conflict. I'd rather not deal with it. But I do know that if I didn't address conflict, it's just going to lead to unresolved issues, team morale's going to go down. It's just not going to be a great space. Even for people who aren't involved in the tension, it can cascade out and other people on the team can feel it. So effective accountability means addressing those issues when they come up with the parties involved. POP meeting model. Thank you, Jorge. Yep, absolutely. That helps with that, those expectations. Okay, so these are top 3 challenges. So let's actually talk about some specific ways to uphold accountability to help mitigate those challenges. And we already have one of them in the chat by Allison. So meetings should have action items. So we're going to start with ways that you can hold yourself accountable as a leader. So you might have noticed throughout our session today that to be an effective leader, we need to start with ourselves, because we can talk about how others need to change and whatnot, but for accountability, to be an effective leader, we need to hold ourselves accountable first, and that sets the standard for others to follow. And we'll have cascading effects to your team, your organization, to also hold themselves accountable. So the first way is to set personal and professional goals. So just as you would with your team, for them to set personal and professional goals, that's something we can do for ourselves. And that way we can evaluate our own progress and then make adjustments as needed. Own your decisions and mistakes. So owning your decisions means being transparent about the decisions you make. So share the why. How did you reach that decision? And then we've talked about this: when things don't go as planned, openly admit your mistakes. And that really just demonstrates humility and commitment to growth. I can share one example. As someone who has been in a data role, I am responsible for providing accurate numbers. That's what people expect of me. There was one time I was asked to provide a statistic. It was put on the website, made public. And then I realized a couple of weeks later that, I had added an extra digit because I was just manually typing it out. So basically the number I was reporting was tenfold what it should have been. And it's just that feeling in the gut, like, yep, I made that mistake. But I knew I had to be accountable and take responsibility for my actions. So I had to have that tough conversation with my CEO, but it went just fine. They realized that I was human, and I think just valued the integrity that I was bringing to the table. So yes, Robbie, be 100% responsible for your own actions. Yep, thanks, Allison. Absolutely. So another way for you to be self-accountable is to ask for feedback. So we'd love to see in the chat, how often are you all getting feedback currently, and who are you getting it from? Stakeholders. Yeah. Okay. Managers, colleagues. Yeah, so it's super important to be able to get feedback so you can monitor how you are impacting others, how you're impacting your team, your colleagues, your managers. Informally via one-on-one meetings, not via surveys. Yeah, yep. When you do it one-on-one, you get a lot more information rather than doing it through a survey. Although surveys can be helpful depending on the context. Thank you for sharing, Jorge, from my team and administrator. Yeah. So that's one recommendation, is to ask for feedback from different people, from people that you're managing, as well as your boss as well. I've gotten it from my customers. Thank you for that, Mary Beth. Absolutely. We might not think about that, to actually ask our customers as well, but that can be really informative, and that's how we can grow. So another strategy to be self-accountable, lead by example. So show your team that you too can be held accountable for your actions and decisions, not just what you expect of them. Maintain consistency in how you apply accountability to yourself and your team. Use accountability partners. So I'm curious, so who has had an accountability partner before? This can be personal, it can be professional. So would love to see in the chat if you've had an accountability partner before, and what was it for? Okay, Mary Beth has. Time management. Okay. That's great. Who else? Professional goals. Okay, Stacy. I have a mentor. Yep. Okay. Thanks, Allison. So a lot of you are on it already for professionally. I think more along the lines of Jorge. Thank you for sharing that. Of running trainings. We often think about accountability partners when it comes to fitness goals. When the new year comes around, we make these resolutions and say, okay, I'm gonna meet you at the gym at this time, and have that person be the accountability partner. But you can also do that professionally as well. And it's so great to see that you're already along thinking that way already. And then another way you can be self-accountable is to track your own performance. This goes back to what Stacy talked about yesterday in our self-awareness session, is to take the time to reflect on yourself. We often don't take the time to do that, but really important to check in on how you're doing, and especially if you have accountability goals as well. So these are all ways you can start with yourself and hold yourself accountable as a leader. So here are some ways you can then build that culture of accountability with your team and your organization. So set clear expectations. So we've talked about this before. Just making sure that everyone in your team, they're clear what they're accountable for. Provide consistent feedback for people. Model the behavior expected from others as well. Because people are going to see right through you if you're asking people to take responsibility for their actions and you're not actually doing it yourself. Some other ways to help build that culture of accountability. So establish transparent communication. We're actually going to have a whole session on effective communication next Wednesday as the third part of our webinar series. So we'll be diving into this more. Encourage ownership of tasks. So hands up here. Who here likes to be micromanaged? Let's see in the chat. Do you like to be micromanaged? Never. Right. Right. We don't want to be micromanaged, right? And our team don't as well. And so people are just going to feel empowered if you give them responsibility for their tasks, allow them to make decisions within their roles. All right. No one likes to be micromanaged. Thank you for that. Okay, another way, create SMART goals with your team. So pop quiz here. What does SMART stand for? What do those letters stand for in SMART goals? Come on, if you don't know, if you can't remember it all, just put in the chat what you do remember. SMART. What do they stand for? All right, Allison. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. All right. Allison wins the prize for today. Thank you for that. Yeah, so by setting SMART goals, clear, measurable goals with specific deadline is just going to create that structure to hold everyone accountable. Everyone knows what to expect. Another way to build that culture of accountability, offer support and resources. So as a leader, you just want to make sure that if you're expecting people to be held, if you're expecting your team to be held accountable, that they have the supports to be able to go through with that. Then follow up on commitments with your team. So I'm not saying, nag someone every time you see them in the hallway, every time you're in a Zoom meeting with them to say, have you done this? Have you done that? But there are ways where you can regularly check in on progress and outcomes. So for example, I think Allison said this, at the top of a meeting, you can check in on action items that were talked about in the previous meetings and just have that be a standard where everyone just checks in. And so you just follow up on commitments without nagging people. All right, so just a quick poll for you. So we talked about strategies for building a culture of accountability. So which one do you find most effective thinking about your leadership style and your organization? So this is going to differ for everyone, just thinking about your leadership style. All right, so I think everyone has answered. So let's see what the results look like. So it looks like a lot of people model the behavior expected from others. Then we also have established transparent communication, set clear expectations, and then offer support and resources. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so what I have here is a quote from the late Bob Proctor. If you're unfamiliar with Bob Proctor, he was an author and personal development coach. So the quote is, accountability is the glue that ties commitment to the result. I'm going to just let that sink in. I find this pretty powerful. The accountability is the glue that ties commitment to the result. So I want to give you some time now to make some commitments for yourself around accountability. So I'd like you to reflect on what we've talked about and how it relates to you, your role, your organization, and have you at least start to create your own personal accountability plan. So I've put in the chat a link to an accountability plan, feel free to download that and you can start making edits in it. I'm going to give you, it's going to take more time than what we have in the meeting in our workshop today. But would just like to give you 3 minutes to start working on it, start putting things down on paper, and to finish after this workshop. So I'll give you 3 minutes now. Okay, hopefully you got a good start on that, but you can use that as a template to work on. It's also really effective to use the same process with your team. So really encourage you to do a similar exercise of creating an accountability plan, but with your team to be able to get their input. And this is just going to empower them to actually implement what they came up with. So in the chat, I am sharing a team accountability plan that you can work on with your team. So you can go ahead and download that and take that away with you. So to recap what we talked about today, so we defined the role of accountability in leadership success. We explored ways to build and sustain a culture of accountability. And then now you have a plan, an accountability plan that you can work on and then implement immediately. So in our webinar series so far, we've explored the importance of self-awareness as a leader, and then today, the importance of accountability. So please join us next week. We'll be touching on the other two pillars of this leadership matrix. On Wednesday next week will be effective communication, and then on Thursday, servant leadership. So just for the sake of time, I've got a couple more slides after this. If you have any questions, I'm going to stay on this call. Feel free to stay back and we can chat. But I'm going to just move on for now and share a survey with you. So you can take a photo of this QR code with your phone if you want to do it on your phone. I'm also sharing the link in the chat. So as we discussed today, regular feedback is important for growth as a leader, and I wouldn't ask you to do something I wouldn't do. So we would really greatly appreciate your feedback on today's session. So invite you to fill that out. You will also get an email with the survey link as well. And then, as I mentioned, next week, it's the same time. We'll be diving into effective communication with my colleague Keenan. I hope to see you there. And then, because you are a part of today's session, we have a code for you to use if you're interested in any other of our services. Please take a photo of this. Take a screenshot of this code. It is good till the end of November. But otherwise, I want you to remind you of this quote. You cannot stumble upon greatness. You walk up to it and introduce yourself. So thank you all so much for your engagement today. Go introduce yourself to greatness. Thank you so much, everyone.